who face eternity easily forget what a lifetime means, what an ending means.
You know it doesn't have to be this way.
No, Kunavine, it does. They need me.
Welcome, End of Dragons Daily 88. Quite a newsy episode today. I've got two kind of big topics. There's a large forum post we'll be going through to do with the legendary Armory, and over on Twitter, the devs actually talked a little bit about voice acting some new members of the cast, and they've made some little videos which I want to show you guys. Now, the timing of their tweets and the people in their tweets might suggest something quite interesting about the idea of playable tengu again. And it's really kind of bizarre. Do you remember, if you watched the previous part, you will have seen some art from Landy Lax, who did that cool impression of what the new Mesmer Elite specialization might be, or Ellie Elite specialization. You know, we've gone in circles. By the way, the poll for that is up at the moment. If you look at my channel, I do have the poll available. Well, they kind of had an idea that I think a lot of us have had, and tweeted about it, and the studio even retweeted. So let's run through that first. First of all, there was this tweet from ArenaNet. This is the introduction of Nashir Dalal, who has a little video here for us. I found it kind of weird wondering what exactly they asked these people to say when they just put a camera on them, their webcam on. But here's the content.
Guild Wars fans, this is Nashir Dalal, and I'm hoping you're excited for Guild Wars 2 End of Dragons. And if you are, hopefully you'll get to learn more in the months to come.
And we close out with the End of Dragons wave. Man, that thing is animated so beautifully. I love looking at that thing in at 60 FPS. There's that weird little dling motif in the audio as well at the end. Was that always there even from the original teaser? So, of course, at the top there, ArenaNet actually say as well, we're excited to talk to you more about their character in the future. Now, that's pretty key, okay? So, we've got someone who's presumably playing a male who's, ethnically attached to Cantha. If you remember when Path of Fire came out, they wanted to have a lot of specifically black talent. They didn't want people necessarily faking any accents. They wanted it to be as authentic and true as possible. I think they'll be doing the same thing on this expansion here. And it's not necessarily this guy is voicing a ton of people out in the countryside. He has a character. And obviously there are any number of cool candidates for that. Someone that we newly meet and interact with. The Emperor, when this was the only tweet that existed, was one of the first things that sprung to my mind. But then, 2 days later, on the 8th, there was another tweet.
Hi, my name is Erika Ishii, and I get to join the cast of Guild Wars 2! And I cannot wait for you to meet my character in the upcoming months. Stay tuned.
Man, she seems extremely bubbly and enthusiastic. Now we have a female. So we have a male and a female joining the cast as new individual characters. Who might they be? Now, the theory then stands, and I do think this will have flashed through a lot of our minds. Landy Lax definitely had the idea that maybe they're not just random little characters, maybe they're commanders. All right, okay, so they might not be the commander, obviously. They would have a different origin and a different entry point into the story, and they'd be referred to differently. But if the studio really is going to try for the playable Tengu thing, as we've discussed many times, you would find there is a representative for the male PC and a representative for the female PC that have like that one individual character they don't reuse elsewhere. Like, if you look at other major characters, there is reuse. You'll be playing through Living World, and you'll hear Bram's voice on any number of other characters as you wander around. You'll hear Timey. I think, in fact, didn't Timey's VA get voiced by Kazmir at some point in Season 2? Was that? There's like a weird little swap around that happened. And yet, for the player character, for the commander, we don't really see them do that. So I kind of like the idea, yeah, that this might be our male Tengu and our female Tengu, if that's going to be a thing. Now, there's obviously a lot of discussion you can then go from, like how that would actually work and flow into the story, which we have done on earlier End of Dragons Daily. This whole conversation came up in the Spud Discord over the past few days, and I mentioned an interesting way around any weird unexpected wriggles would be that Tengu actually unlocks after the story and is something like an epilogue, and therefore you can treat the characters totally separately. And then if the game's going into a whole new phase of storytelling later anyway, maybe you don't need to distinguish between the new Tengu commanders and the regular commander, because we're in totally new subject material, new areas of the world, new characters supporting us, and so on. You know, it's similar to how we've already made a ton of different decisions that make our commanders different, the race that we play, the order that we join, and so on. And these things are very rarely, if ever, actually referenced. There is a bigger difference, though, in the origin and story probably between a new commander joining that's got a Tengu origin and didn't participate in the Battle of Zaitan and didn't participate in Morjamoth and so on, and in particular doesn't know Aurene. I mean, that's the big one, really, having no connection to Aurene. Because again, I just want to be clear, I really don't think if they're adding Tengu, it will be backwards playable through all that old content. Not unless there's no voice acting at all. They might enable it and just say, well, look, there's no voice acting. And I think that's credible if there's a lot of communication from the studio about that. Oh, they might do like AI voice acting or something like that, but generally speaking, I don't think they'll do it. And then therefore this new commander is going to have a totally different origin, and there are some games to play there. But that's what I think it might be. Now here's what's even cooler. Back to Landy Lax, they made some art on the idea. You can see it on screen. It's beautiful, just as the previous art was. They tweeted saying specifically Tengu ? And the studio, Guild Wars 2's official account, actually retweeted this art. Now, you can take that as just enthusiasm for a pretty picture. You can take that as enthusiasm for the Tengu. I mean, these two characters can be joining the cast as prominent Tengu, one male, one female, and not be a player character. I mean, they're really not confirming that it's a playable race thing, but the tweet is structured very much that it's like, oh, we think these are playable Tengu, here's some art of it. And the studio was happy enough to retweet it, which I think is very awesome on multiple levels, even if it's not because they know it's a knowing hint and they want to indulge in that a little bit. So yeah, just a fun thought and an extra little thing to keep an eye on as we roll up to the end of the month. And again, I really do think this stream, they said that there'll be big features there. If the Tengu are playable, it's in this stream, guys. You will know by the end of the month for sure. I don't think they'll keep it a secret like with the Griffin or whatever. It's coming in a matter of days. And in that world, I mean, maybe the official Twitter is a little bit happier to be a little bit more open and jokey about this kind of stuff. Maybe. Or we're looking too deeply, which I totally get. Welcome to the fandom. Alright, so for the second half of the video, I want to talk a little bit about the Legendary Armory. The devs have made a big post over on the forums from the senior engineer who worked on the Armory to talk about a bunch of the little wriggles and issues that I've mentioned in recent videos. Interestingly too, an equivalent Reddit thread was posted by Josh Davis over on our Guild Wars 2. So it looks like with their new form of communication and so on, the studio is embracing that place again. And I think that's generally a really refreshing, good move. It's something that we haven't seen them do for a few years now, and the Reddit is overall, particularly when the game's in a positive place, a pretty decent area for discussion about the game. And I do say that despite an insane number of personal attacks on me at the moment. There was a whole thread there yesterday, generally just kicking me in the face, which just adds so much stress and sadness to this job, it's unreal. On that note, I had a ton of discussion on the previous like 3 End of Dragons dailies ago. I did point out some of the long-term philosophical issues that I do think are very real with the Armory. And I'm absolutely not going back on those observations, but I do want to be clear to you guys that in general, as a short-term value to the game, and when I say short-term, I mean the next 2-3 years, I think the Legendary Armory is incredibly powerful and an incredibly good part of the game. It's obviously, as far as providing immediate goals and incentive for people to play, a fantastic thing, and I've said that multiple times. I've complimented it multiple times, even back to the original blog post where they mentioned it. I'd also ask you guys to stop stereotyping and guessing as to my position and my opinions about the game. I don't have criticisms of the Armory long term because Primordus died at the end of Champions. I'm not making observations about the Armory because I have every legendary in the game, because I don't. I mean, I've had a ton of comments of people saying, oh, it's only because he's got all the armor and so on. I really don't have all of that stuff. I have a bunch of new goals too. I try very hard to be unbiased and impartial, disconnect my own account and my own experiences from updates and critique. But what I'd really ask you guys to remember is I've been here covering this game, this franchise, a long time. So I do think about 5 years in the future. I do think about 10 years in the future and what the Armory will look like and mean there. And they probably will need refinements at that point. So that's an observation I want to make. I do remember very clearly what this game was about, philosophically, what Guild Wars 1 was about. And I can tell you for a fact, grinding for thousands of hours to get substantive economical and quality of life bonuses is not in the spirit of Guild Wars 2. Yes, it's nice once you've done the thousands of hours. Now you have access to all this quality of life and freedom, and you might say that's what Guild Wars is about. It's about the quality of life and freedom. But that's not true. What Guild Wars was about was eliminating the thousands of hours, not leaning into the thousands of hours. The people who are super hardcore and invested should be getting rewards and being incentivized to go do things that do not have tangible benefits, that are aesthetic, cosmetic, subjective benefits. These Legendary Armory developments, while they're basically just emphasizing what already exists, they do represent even more steps away from what Guild Wars was all about. And it's very simple, guys. All you have to do, if you were around at the launch of this game and for the first, is think, would people have really enjoyed or accepted this way back then? And the fact is, they would have rebelled against it. Now, I am open to the idea of, can the philosophy change? Should the community want something different? Should the studio want something different? Is it important to actually move along and enter a new era? I think that's totally valid and probably even a really good thing. We've seen in many, many ways over the years how Guild Wars 2 has continued to refine and push and change what it wants to be. And I think that, again, this kind of goes back to the studio communication. I really do view so much of the discussion we had recently of just accentuating how lost the community is. What kind of product is this? In what ways do we stand with the MMO scene? And in what ways are we the counterculture to the rest of the MMO scene? So anyway, this is kind of becoming a massive tangent. Let's get on to the news. Most of the previous discussion I've had about the Armory is about this stuff, and well, the studio has some really good answers for us. So here they say, ArenaNet staff says, hey, Catmanda Nico here. I'm the senior engineer who worked on the Legendary Armory. We've been keeping an eye on discussion regarding the Armory since the blog post on Tuesday, and we wanted to respond to a few common questions. So they got this clarification out on the week, which is fantastic. It's right before, I guess, they ended work. I mean, it's early Saturday for me now, and the post is 11 hours old. Okay, slotted upgrades and infusions. So, as we all know, when we log in after the update, all of our equipped stuff is going to vanish and just become Armory stuff. And the question is, well, what about the infusions and stuff? They say upgrades and infusions in currently equipped gear and equipped templates, aka our regular Armory, will remain in place. For items in our bank, in our shared and regular inventory, infusions and upgrades will be popped out and placed in our inventory. So do be aware, if you've got a bunch of infusions in like odd places, and you're terrible with inventory management. I mean, I can't imagine any player that would ever be bad at inventory management. But if you've got loads of full inventories, maybe clear just a little bit of space. You don't want it overflowing tons and going into that mini menu. And I don't know, I'd be a little bit cautious of that, okay? So just be aware, guys. And if you want to be really safe, just manually remove all your infusions yourself if you like. This could be a serious issue with the game if there's a bug with this and people are getting their infusions and whatnot deleted. Slumbering trinkets. Players will not be able to acquire any new slumbering trinkets after July 13th. Any existing slumbering ones will be absorbed into the Legendary Armory. So this is only really valid for people who have undergone the Legendary progression for the PvP and the World vs. World accessories. The recipes for the slumbering ones will instead reward the awakened one immediately. But what about slumbering trinket owners? We're going to be adding a vendor to the game that allows you to upgrade any slumbering trinket to the fully awakened one. You'll be able to use the effect toggle in the equipment panel to disable the effects from the awakened versions if you like. The vendor won't be in game with the launch of the Armory, but we plan to release it in a future update. So there'll be some fringe players that kind of have to wait a little bit longer. They also say World vs. World player, well, Conflux will no longer be unique, so players who currently use the Awakened and Slumbering versions can continue to use their current equipment loadout. To be honest, I don't really understand that last sentence there. But what I do want to point out, there's something quite interesting here then, guys. If they are removing the idea of having Slumbering and then building it into Awakened for the visuals, that actually kind of means something for PvP. See, you have to play tournaments for PvP. That's the whole reason I was playing tournaments around Christmas and found them bot and hacker infested. Well, now people don't have to do that. So they've actually made the acquisition of the PvP one basically easier and filtered people less around into tournaments. I saw some response on Reddit of people saying, oh, that's brilliant, I didn't want to do tournaments. But at the same time, I really like cross-pollination. I really like the idea of pushing more people into the tournament scene. I do think it's a beautiful and incredible part of the game. So hopefully there'll be other incentive. I mean, right now, the current Mystic coin prices and the fact that the tournaments award them maybe is incentive enough. Who knows? Next, I want to talk about Aurora, Vision, and Coalescence. Now, this is the big one, okay? Because as we've noticed, and if you watch my video, you will have seen, there aren't actually checkboxes to toggle these on or off. So they say, we wanted to make a toggle for the 3 PvE trinkets. Unfortunately, these 3 items are set up differently from the others with visual effects, and giving them a toggle is a complex problem. Probably sounds silly. It's just a checkbox, right? Well, a quick peek behind the curtain. These items are set up using a stacking buff based on the number of equipped legendary trinkets to determine which visual effect is added to the character model, i.e. the effect is actually added by the buff, not the item. The toggles in the equipment panel on the visual affects the items themselves. It's not changing which item is slotted. This makes it more difficult to convert them to the new system where effects are on the item and can be toggled. Conflux and Transcendence previously got their effect from a buff, not the item, but because they were a non-stacking buff, we were able to just move the effect to the item with a small amount of work and allow it to benefit from the toggle. Fixing this for Aurora, Vision, and Coalescence would require a rework of the visual effects for those items and how they're applied, which would likely leave some players unhappy as it would change their appearance, or a significant engineering investment to build a one-off solution. That investment isn't something we can commit to right now. Our engineering team is focused on End of Dragons, Alliance's DirectX 11. We understand how important this is to all of you, but that this isn't the response you're hoping for, but in the spirit of transparency, we wanted to let you know where things currently stand. Look at that, guys. They are being candid about having hit a roadblock, and they don't have an answer for us. They're just saying, look, we're sorry. You're going to have to wait. I actually really like that. That's exactly the kind of thing that I want to see ArenaNet doing more of. Owning it where they basically don't have a great answer for us. Now, what I would say is the idea of like doing a lot of work for a one-off solution. I wonder if they are still considering the idea of an effects wardrobe, or like, you know, many people dating back to the introduction of the ghostly infusion really have talked about the idea of like an infusions and an aura cosmetic wardrobe that you can toggle and set things up with. If they do go far with that, you might end up seeing that those get grandfathered in there instead. I do think that would generally be something good for the game that I want to see in terms of reining back some of the visual creep and whatever. And maybe then they can actually continue to emphasize this idea of multiple items building one specific aura. I think that's a really cool, genius concept. And kind of allows Guild Wars 2 to start offering rewards based around set bonuses and stuff, like visual set bonuses. And I'd hate to see all of that go away. So curious to see what they go with there. It definitely sounds like more of a long-term thing, though. Next, Eternity, Sunrise, and Twilight. We already answered this question in another thread, but for the sake of completeness, we'll answer it again here. And that's good, because I never mentioned it in my video yet. Players that have bound Eternity to their accounts prior to the Armory will receive both Sunrise and Twilight for free in their Armory. And you will have had the skins unlocked anyway, right? Automatically. Unless, I guess, you just bypass and bought on the TP. I understand. Unbound Eternities bought from the trading post and added to the Armory will also act the same way. However, any new Eternities made by the Mystic Forge after this update using the token setup will not grant those additional unlocks. So do be aware of that. Another cool update here, the Generation 2 stuff. You know, they mentioned, like, oh, you can put 2 Binding of Ipos in your Armory. And everyone's like, well, hold on, you can only make one of those precursors, and it's all account bound, so how's that possible? Well, they say players after this patch will be able to craft multiple Gen 2 pres after the Armory releases, meaning you can acquire multiples of Gen 2 legendaries. I personally don't see myself as someone ever having the money or the time to do that, but maybe someone out there. I mean, I can imagine if there is a build that requires like 3 or 4 swords in a rotation or something, before these End of Dragons legendaries start releasing, then yeah, maybe you'd want to make 2. But generally speaking, I would just, you know, have one of each generation's legendary and skin them to look the same if that's what you're going for. Then finally, they say legendary armory item caps. Now, this is nice to have proper clarification about, and it actually answers one of my critiques about the armory that I'm really happy to see. Each type of equipment has its own limit, and the limit is counted separately for every unique legendary item. For example, you can unlock an Envoy Light Helm and an Ardent Glorious Light Helm. So what they're saying there is a reason, if you want to get the PvP armor and the World vs. World armor and the PvE armor if you like. Now, I actually only have the PvE light armor finished. I haven't got any of the other game types. But I'm close-ish to maybe going for PvP and World vs. World. World vs. World would be like an epic time gate, and PvP I can only do once I've got my final llamas. But once I'm at that point, I liked the idea of maybe being able to collect those. The way they talked about the armory before, it seemed like it was impossible. It's actually not. You can do it if you want. And they're very explicit. Here's a complete list. Any two-handed weapon, you can put 2 of in the armory. Main hands, 2. Off hands, 2. One-handed that you can swap hands, 4. Armors, it's 1 per piece, so PvE, World vs. World, PvP, per armor class, so there's like a ton of armor you could go for. Back items, they say 1. Shouldn't that be 3? Because World vs. World, PvE, and PvP back piece. Trinkets, 1 of each, which is weird, by the way. because there's going to be a new legendary amulet. I guess that will go up to 2 when that amulet actually comes in. And then runes is 7, sigils is 8. You might wonder, why is sigils 8? Well, if you imagine that you have 2 for one weapon set, 2 for another weapon set, that's 4, and then underwater you can do 2 and 2 again. So that's why they've gone with 8 there for you. I can't remember how many of those damn things I crafted. I might need to make 1 or 2 more, I'm not sure. But there you have it, some little clarifications about the armory, and well, would you look at that, we've done a whole End of Dragons daily that doesn't even have any Q&A back and forth, because the devs are doing this much news and interesting things to talk about. So that's fantastic. We'll be back to the regular stuff next time. Again, remember, there is a poll. Go vote in the poll. What is the elite specialization, guys? We got to know. Thanks very much. If you missed it, by the way, I did a graphics video. The response I've had to that is incredible. Like, people saying, oh my god, WP, you gained me 30 frames and my game looks better. Like, there's a ton of really, really nice, like, heavy user endorsement for that graphics video. But I think because I was doing a lot of videos around there, a lot of people might have missed it. So do keep an eye out on that if you want more to watch. And I'll see you guys tomorrow for more End of Dragons Daily. Thanks very much for watching. See you next time.